Welcome to Space World. Let's go.
Why do I feel like I've been standing here for months? Okay, so Rayman 3 is the third mainline game in the series, released in 2003. And this is the first mainline Rayman game that isn't made by Michel Ancel. Instead, he was working on another game, which was Beyond Good and Evil. And I've only played a few hours of it, and I thought it was decent. So instead, the team behind the Rayman series had to work on Rayman 3 without Ancel, and we end up with the game we have today. He was proud of his team, though he did state that if he worked on Rayman 3, it would have been a completely different game. I think the only thing Ancel did was Rayman's design. Not a fan. I've always preferred his bandana design. I mean, it's fine. It fits the tone of the game it's going for. I'm just not a fan of edgy redesigns. Anyways, when Rayman 3 released, critics gave this game an astounding, it was okay. Well, yeah, it did got positive reviews, though some people were mixed on it. I remember liking it as a child, but when I played it as an adult, it wasn't as good as I remembered. And before that, we gotta talk about the ports. Unlike the other games in the series, where each port has unique differences and some added features, Rayman 3 ports are very much identical, other than the GameCube has Game Boy Advance features. PS2 seems to be the same, except the menu and loading zones is slower. And I didn't notice any changes in the original Xbox version. But I'm gonna be doing PC, because it's the closest you're gonna get to a definitive port with bug fixes. The game will start playing the Matter intro, but I can't play it because of copyright, so I'll just play the game. It starts on a peaceful night, with teensies traveling through the forest. Then suddenly, a black lum named Entree is turning all the red lums into black lums. Eventually, they ran into a creature and took all of its fur, and Entree became a hoodlum. So he started chasing Murphy, and he ran into Rayman and Globox. Globox wakes up, but Rayman's still asleep. Man, he must be really tired. And Globox took Rayman's hands, and Murphy takes Rayman and flies off. Then you do an on-rail segment, and land in a safe spot. Murphy then brings up the manual explaining Rayman what's going on, and explains the score system and how the combo works. If you collect gems or beat up an enemy, the combo meter will fill up, and when the combo stops, you'll be rewarded with more points. And no, you can't skip this cutscene. So after doing some platforming, we found Globox in a barrel.
You wouldn't happen to be different and challenged, would you?
Wow, okay, I just missed one jump. You don't have to make fun of me for it, jerk. Well, we break Globox out of the barrel, and got our hands back. Then suddenly, the hoodlums raid the fairy council. Inside, we found one of the hoodlums. Beating him releases Entree, which he escapes, and we get to use our first combat fatigue. Vortex, which is used to drill down platforms. Eventually, we found Globox, and Entree flew straight into his mouth. And we entered the heart of the world, with teensies just having a party. So we need to get Entree out of Globox's stomach. So a teensy told us we need to take Globox to the doctors.
He may even force Globox to drink plum juice, and we all know Globox is allergic to plum juice. See you in Rayman 4!
Meh, I stopped caring about that years ago. I'm over it. And then you have to go through these surfboard segments, which is neat, though they do overstay their welcome, at least if you fall off a lot. So the doctor lives in Clearleaf Forest, and this is where you are introduced to 3 new combat fatigues, such as the Metal Fist, which does more damage, and it's used to break wooden doors. It pretty much acts like the Gold Fist. Next is the Jaw Lock. This is used to swing on hooks and shock enemies. And the Rocket is often used for puzzles, like hitting switches to open a door. So once you clear the forest, you have to fight the Hoodlum Stomper. You want to activate 3 switches, then the Rocket Combat Fatigue will appear, and use it to shoot him down. But you want to be quick, because the Hoodlum Stomper will crush it. It's best to lure him away, then hit the last switch. Once you beat him, you get to take control of a Stomper. And you can't get hurt in this. And all you do is stomp enemies until the health bar is down. Well, this is a little underwhelming. So I reached to the doctors. The doctors try to get Entree out of Globox's stomach by doing some music shenanigans. Which didn't work, so he told us to go to the next doctors. Then we do a surfboard section again, and it seems that the road is broken off. Nah man, we're gonna make that jump. Oh. So we have no choice but to go through the Bog of Murk, where you meet Begoniacs, this creep. Then you have to fight her, and you want to be careful not to turn into a frog from the potion. I see a lot of people try to chase after her as a frog. For me, I just stand still and do charge attacks, trying to put some use in those curve punches. After running around in the swamp, you ran into a mansion, and you do a neat boss fight when you have to find Razov around the mansion, though the camera is pretty bad here. Actually, this is probably a good time to talk about the camera. It's not great. It bumps into walls, and I don't like it when it gets to a fixed position. It messes up my curve punches a bit. And let me tell you something, when the camera gets stuck on something, it's really annoying. Anyways, in phase 2, you gotta fight off Razov on a wrecking ball. It's not as interesting as the first fight. After that, we found Glowbox, and Razov found himself with Begoniacs, and she's gonna do unspeakable things to him. So we arrive at the land of the living dead, a peaceful place with teensy spirits, and there's a tower to go up to, and when you save one of the spirits, they'll open up their world for you. It's definitely one of the prettier levels, and there's a part where you go underwater, and you seem to control better underwater than you do in the surface. Also, you fight a robot spider, which is actually a fun boss fight. So finally we reach the second doctor, and tries to get Entree out by using Glowbox's belly as bongos.
Oh, yeah.
But that didn't work. So we have to go to the third doctor that lives in the desert of Canarans. This place is way too hot. So if you want to cross the desert, you need to use the tunnels. So you enter a cave, and you gotta do stealth sections to stay away from Canarans, which I don't find this fun. The Canarans are scary at first, but they're actually not that bad. They're pretty slow, and they only just push you when you touch them. You will overhear the Canarans' conversation, and for me, it's the only time the game is kinda funny.
Since Sally died, I feel so alone. No one to hold in my arms. No one to love.
Once you pass that, you get caught by Reflux, and you end up fighting him in the arena. This boss fight would have been fine if his attack patterns didn't take too long. When you beat him, the king rewards Rayman the ability to use Grimace, which is used to turn black lums back into red lums. So we finally reach the third doctor, and the other doctors help out as well. And they start their musical, forcing Entree to get out of Glowbox's stomach, and Entree escapes, gathering the black lums, then head back to the Cave of Canarans, and join forces with Reflux. And we enter the longest shortcut, where the doctor tells us that Reflux and Entree are working together, and you gotta collect crowns to get through the shortcut. Actually, this is probably a good time to talk about Rayman's gameplay and platforming. His combat is pretty good, but he feels stiff overall. Like, you can't move around on slides, and his movement in the air is slow, and even if you run and jump, you're still locked into that speed, and you can't do short hops. Also, jumping out of a ledge grab doesn't feel as snappy as it does in the other games. Maybe I'm just used to the other titles in the series, but I find this Rayman a bit slow, and platforming hasn't really been much of a challenge. In fact, it's kinda dull, actually. Anyways, after doing that, the doctors gives us a boat to ride, where you have to use cannons to blast off the fishes, until you reach the summit beyond the clouds. It's a fun snow level, and there's something I didn't notice until recently, but where did Glowbox go? He didn't appear again until you see him in ice in the snowboard section. That's weird. Oh yeah, the snowboard section was neat. Okay, next is a hoodlum headquarters, a factory level where the hoodlums are hiding out. Throughout the level, there's this chick that does announcements, and Glowbox wants some of that action.
Exterior temperature, -61 degrees. Interior temperature, 98.6 degrees and rising.
Eventually, Glowbox ends up falling for that female Glowbox trap. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that half the Rayman 2 cast was cut out, so I guess Glowbox isn't married in this one. So a bit of platforming later, we gotta destroy the horrible machine by hitting the target to fill up the meter. Yeah, this boss sucks. Then you gotta escape the factory from collapsing. I swear the lava rises way too quickly. This is where I think short hops would have been good here. After escaping a huge explosion, we enter the Tower of Eleptus. Also, are we just gonna forget about Glowbox? Is he okay? Well, I guess we'll just have to climb out the tower and find out. There's not much to say about this section. It's just fight a horde of hoodlums, and more okay platforming. Well, it turns out Glowbox has found a hovercraft, and he tricked Rayman thinking he got hurt.
Good Glowbox! Glowbox! Are you okay? Glowbox!
Man, that's the most Rayman has said anything since the beginning of the game. Now he can fly through the tower with turret sections that are kinda meh. Oh, and you don't want to bump into walls here, like Jesus. And now we just need a fight reflux, and you gotta use the combat fatigues against him. Then he turns giant, and you gotta be a scepter with the metal fist. Then he starts floating, and you gotta fly up and use the rocket. And then the final phase, you use the turret to finish him off. Dude, 4 phases is too much. And just like that, oh, we just killed him. We turned Entree into a red lum, and the black lums turned back into red lums, and Rayman and Glowbox landed back where they left off. And Rayman's hands walked on their own, playing a puppet show with the red lum, then ended up scaring it, and turned the red lum back into Entree, and the game ended on a cliffhanger. Okay, so positives. Rayman 3 is definitely a pretty game. I like the combat system, even if it is a bit repetitive, and the music is good too. While I don't find most of them very memorable, they're still good. And that is pretty much it for positives. I don't know, I think this game is just okay. The story is kind of weak. I mean, I do prefer a Rayman game with a simple story, but considering the characters throw out a bunch of jokes, and most of them are kind of annoying, it kind of puts me off. This would have been fine if the jokes were actually funny, and there were some points where the game can catch you off guard, but oftentimes I didn't find them funny and they didn't age very well. You don't really get a chance to know these characters either. They kind of just do their bit and they're never mentioned again. It doesn't help that you can't really hear what the characters are saying. It's either they speak too quickly or their accent is too thick for me to understand. Like, did you get any of that? Another issue I have, and it's the same problem as Rayman 2, and it's being too easy. I know Rayman 2's huge health bar is unnecessary, and it's too easy, but the thing is, you still have to do obstacles legitimately. You can't just lose your health whenever you want. You don't want to game over and recollect the lums in that section again. Even if 2 is too easy, you still have to try. Now, maybe it could be that I'm just good at the game, but for Rayman 3, my health bar has hardly been scratched. The enemies don't do enough damage, and there's always red lums in every corner of the level, and the collected red lums reappear after getting hit, so you're not gonna be losing health anytime soon. I feel like the only way to get a game over in this is if you were to purposely sit in muck or lava for too long, or fall off the stage in the final boss. As far as I know, it's the only area with a death floor. Another problem I have is the score system. I think it's a downgrade from collecting lums. And the thing is, I like the score system in games. I think score can be fun if it's done right, and I don't care if it's considered outdated. I like going for high scores. The problem is how Rayman 3 handles the score system. So you have a 5-star rating depending how well you score. There are hidden collectibles, like 2 bugs. One of them you have to get by staring at it, and the other you get by walking up to it. Though I find it easier to use the lock-on button. And then you have the green gems that gives you a lot of points. Now, you don't have to collect every single gem. You can still get 5 stars if you combo well enough. And for a while, it seems like you're doing well, until you realize that the game doesn't show the stars or the things you collected, and the points don't do anything for you. Yes, you unlock minigames, but we'll get to that. I mean, you do get Happy Murphy stance for getting a good score, but I feel like that doesn't really tell me if I did good or not. Also, the level select is not very good. You can't select any part of a level. You always have to start from the beginning. It's not bad for some levels, but ones like the first level and the Desert of Kanarans, it's a bit of an issue. So if I want to replay the first level, I have to do the on-rail section and get 6 red lums, and at that point I can put the controller down, wait for Murphy's cutscene, and then you get to actually play the game. That takes about 2 minutes. And that's not a one-time deal. You have to go through this every time if you want to replay the first level. So, if you want to play the parts of the levels you like, you have to work your way there. Oh yeah, and that Grimace power? Well, you can't use it in the earlier levels. You can only use it after the Reflux boss and onwards. Since you can't select certain parts of a level, and the game doesn't show the stars or collectibles, it's kinda hard to decide which level needs to be improved. I don't even think the score system was made for unlocking stuff. It seems that it was mostly made for Rayman Zone. So, when you beat Rayman 3, you get a code, and you would enter this in the Rayman Zone website. And depending how well you score, you may get some merchandise. But that website is long gone now. And if you think I'm being over-exaggerated about the score system, and it shouldn't be taken seriously, then, well, I mean, you're not wrong. You don't have to get the best possible score for every level. You can just ignore them. But for me, it feels like the things you do in this game is very limited. Every time I replay Rayman 3 and I'm going for the score, I get to the middle of a level and I just think to myself, wait, why am I doing this again? And while it may not be a problem in the original game, I do think it's a problem in the HD version. The HD version included achievements, and one of them being collecting all the bugs, green gems, and getting 5 stars in every level. I remember missing one of the bugs, and since the game doesn't show the things you collected, I had to replay half the entire game, checking every bug until I find the one I missed. And while the green gems are cleverly hidden, some are cryptic and downright annoying. Like this one, for example, with the hoodlum bombers on stilts. If you break the cage, you get the vortex. However, if you let the hoodlum bombers break their own stilts and beat the copter hoodlums, then break the cage, you get a green gem. Like, that's a bit cruel. And getting 5 stars in every level is not fun. I swear, there were so many times where I think I got a high enough score, only to get 95%. I pretty much had to cheese this one by quitting before the game save and do the section again until I get 100%. As being one of the small number of people who have gotten all the achievements in this game, 100%ing Rayman 3 was very aggravating. If you're someone who goes for completion, I don't recommend completing Rayman 3 HD. In fact, I don't recommend playing the HD version at all. It didn't fix the glitches in the console version. Some features were removed, like the Matter intro, and the bonus videos were replaced with Rayman Origins concept art. Some of the textures and lightings are messed up, like the Razorbeard Easter egg, and the mountains in the background. And apparently there's a glitch where if you backtrack a level before beating the game, you'll unlock all the levels except the last one, and you can't unlock it. So if you want to backtrack to every level, be sure you don't backtrack and beat the game first. I learned this the hard way. If you're gonna play Rayman 3, just play any of the console or PC releases. Now for bonuses, you unlock videos of a hoodlum beating up a creature dressed as Rayman, if that's your thing. I like the one where the creature didn't show up, and the hoodlum got hit by the crane. There's not much reason to watch these in-game, since you can watch it on YouTube, including the GameCube exclusives for both US and PAL. Then you have the mini-games, and honestly, they're not that great. Some of them are fine, but the rest of them aren't really that fun. I get bored of them after 20 seconds, then I move on. The one called Balloons doesn't feel like a mini-game. It feels like a cut level from the main game. Like, these are some lousy rewards. Like, maybe if one of them had multiplayer in them, like the GameCube exclusive minigames that uses the Game Boy Advance link cables, then maybe there'd be some value to them. But otherwise, they feel like an afterthought, and are not really worth playing more than once or twice. Speaking of GameCube exclusives, there's one minigame that was considered impossible to unlock. You're supposed to unlock it by linking the Game Boy Advance version of Rayman 3 with a 100% file. The reason why you can't unlock it is because the final boss doesn't save after beating it. However, if you enter a 100% code, you'll have all the levels beaten, including the final boss. So if you connect your Game Boy Advance to the GameCube, you can unlock the final minigame, being 2D Nightmare. It was really cool to play this for the first time, though it made me realize that the gameplay style is not designed for tight 2D platforming. While it still requires cheating to get this, it's the only legitimate way to get it. Meh, even with that, I still think it's an okay game. I just don't find it as replayable as the other Rayman games. It doesn't feel as polished, and it could have used a few more months of development time. Yes, this game is pretty, and it has some fun moments, but man, this game can be a slog sometimes. In fact, I kind of find Rayman 3 hard to go back to. I'm not interested in beating my own score, and the good parts is not enough to save it for me. And this is coming from a guy who grew up on the game. Sorry, I'm not a fan of this one. Its issues may not be a problem for other people, but for me personally, I think its issues is holding the game back. Well, at least I got this one down. And as much as I want to do the other GBA games, well, I can't hide from this forever.